So needless to say, with the lockdown and everything, I've had quite a bit of time to sit back and enjoy some good old-fashioned nostalgic television, and one of my personal picks just so happens to be BBC's Torchwood. This was one of the first shows I ever properly binged as a youngin', which might have been a bad thing, seeing how I was only 12 or so at the time, and it featured imagery like this. As a lifelong Doctor Who fan, I was obsessed with anything that tied even slightly into the main franchise, including this, the Sarah Jane Adventures, those awful games that the BBC website had. I was a proper Doctor Who nut, at least until Matt Smith and Stephen Moffat took over, but that's a story for another video. While stuck in lockdown, I figured, hey, why not use this as an excuse to binge something that I loved when I was a kid? I'm sure it'll hold up just as much now as it did back then.
How's that for shapeshift?
The plot of Torchwood revolves around the titular Torchwood Institute, a secret organisation dedicated to protecting Britain and the world at large from alien threats that slip through a rift in time and space which runs through the city of Cardiff. The show was developed by Russell T Davies as a spin-off series from the 2005 revival of Doctor Who. It spanned 5 years with a total of 4 seasons, the first 3 produced solely by the BBC, and the 4th co-produced by American broadcasters Starz. The initial concept for the show actually began well before the Doctor Who revival, with Davies developing an idea for a sci-fi crime drama in the same vein of shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, and boy did that show with some casting decisions later on. The idea, then titled Excalibur, was abandoned for years until BBC 3 commissioned Davies to develop an after-watershed science fiction series for the channel. During early development in 2005, the Doctor Who revival was given the code name Torchwood to keep the show a secret from eager eyes. And after the term was seeded into the show itself, Davies connected the word to his Excalibur idea, and thus we have the beginnings of Torchwood. Keeping in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer style that Davies wanted to emulate, each episode features its own Freak of the Week style situation, with the team getting on the case to save the day and bring down the alien menace, with the previously established character Captain Jack Harkness leading the way. As a result of airing after the watershed, the showrunners got away with a lot more graphic content than Doctor Who ever could. I mean, the second episode features an alien that kills with sex, for Christ's sake. It ain't exactly subtle. In a sense, the BBC had found a way to hit multiple demographics through expanding on the Doctor Who universe. You had the show itself, which was accessible for people of all ages, the Sarah Jane Adventures, which was aimed squarely at kids, and then you had Torchwood, which, try though they did to deny it, was basically Doctor Who for grown-ups. However, it wasn't without its drawbacks when it got started. The first season is the very definition of a mixed bag. For example, the pacing in a lot of episodes just feels off. A lot of these stories could have easily be told in half an hour, and much of the runtime often feels padded with unnecessary side shit that does not need much focusing on. The episode Combat, for instance, features something like 5 minutes of Tosh concocting an elaborate false backstory for Owen while he's on a case, complete with fake name, fake website, fake company, fake video explaining his fake business, and fake phone number. Why does this need so much attention? Couldn't we get back to the actual plot of the episode instead of diverting to this stuff that does not matter? This happens a lot in the first season, where the story will take random detours that don't have any real impact on the overall story and just grinds everything to a screeching halt. The BBC budget also reared its head quite noticeably with some of the CGI. Yeah, I know it was early 2000s TV and all that, but come on, I mean, this is just laughable, guys. In fairness, there are some CGI shots that look decent enough, but when it's bad, oh boy, it's bad. The editing as well often got a bit odd, like they'd use the same 4 or 5 drone shots of Cardiff continuously whenever they transitioned from one scene to another. That and the show has this bizarre fetish for speeding up the footage and adding a weird sound effect over it just randomly, and half the time it's not even in scenes where it makes sense. Like, why was that there? Oh, Tosh just got done banging an alien woman. That requires a weird speed increase for dramatic effect for some reason. Oh, and we have to add a little science fiction effect there because, you know, we have to remind the audience that what they're watching is science fiction. That being said, the first season of Torchwood still does have plenty of positives. For one thing, it is able to tackle some very adult themes in a lot of its episodes that its parent show couldn't really get away with at the time. Unlike Doctor Who, which leans to a more optimistic, yay, humanity is good and the universe is beautiful stance, Torchwood is, shall we say, a little more grim. Right in the first season, we are dealing with themes like existentialism, corruption, sexuality, whether or not human life really matters in the grand scheme of things. One episode, for instance, ends with Captain Jack willingly allowing a race of elemental fairy creatures, just go with it, to abduct a little girl into their ranks, essentially sacrificing her for the greater good of humanity. This is a far cry from the majority of Doctor Who episodes that typically end with a happy little bow on top, despite all of the horrors and traumas that the characters faced. This to me cuts to the greatest strength of all seasons of Torchwood. The fact that it is such an adult show when compared to its parent show means that it can get away with talking about more adult things and in a more adult way. In the example I mentioned, the show never makes a definitive statement about whether what Jack did was morally right or wrong. It leaves it incredibly open-ended and up to the viewer's interpretation, and I like that kind of stuff. To give another example, the episode Countryside ends with the reveal that the malevolent killers that have been abducting and butchering people off the roads weren't aliens, as we and our heroes assumed, but in fact a town of fucked up human cannibals. This not only explores some seriously dark themes, like are humans really any better than the aliens that Torchwood hunts, but it also has a deep impact on the characters, particularly Gwen. I love it when a show is able to accomplish that effectively. However, speaking of characters, that does bring me to one of the biggest negatives of season 1. To be fair, Gwen Cooper herself actually makes for a good main protagonist, at least at first. She kind of strikes me as a bit of an Alice in Wonderland type figure in the first couple of episodes, this doe-eyed innocent who gets thrust into this bizarre alien world. That's a strong template for you to have as a POV character, and the show does her justice without making her seem stale or bland or one-note. The ending to episode 2 really shows the strength of Gwen's character, as she outright offers to become host to an alien creature, essentially giving her life to save the girl that the alien is currently inhabiting. That's a good way of showcasing the strength and moral backbone of your main hero. I mean, they make some dumb as hell decisions with her character later on, but for the first half of season 1, she's a pretty solid hero. Then of course there's Captain Jack Harkness, who is easily everybody's favourite. You already know him, he's charming, he's witty, he flirts outrageously with everyone he meets, but what I like most about Jack in season 1 is how hardcore he can be, which stands in real contrast to his normally aloof personality. But at the same time, it doesn't feel unwarranted. We can tell that Jack has been working for Torchwood for a long time. He's seen some horrible stuff, so naturally he's a lot more hardened than his teammates. In a sense, he is Torchwood's version of the Doctor, only darker and, you know, willing to use guns. But as far as likable characters go, that's about it. I'm sorry, I know I'm gonna get a lot of heat from the fan base for saying this, but having rewatched the show now, I have to say, these people are really hard to like in the first season. Let's start with Tosh, because she's the easy one. Toshiko Sato is the most characterless character in the first series. For the longest time, it seemed like she was just the brainy Asian girl stereotype and absolutely nothing else, and yeah, honestly, she kind of is. The only time when she started to get anything even close to development was the episode Greeks Bearing Gifts, which focuses on her starting a relationship with a woman who turns out to be an alien. She gives Tosh a pendant that allows her to read people's minds, and she finds out that her colleagues think, well, very little of her. And this wouldn't be so bad. In fact, it would make for some pretty juicy character insight, like she's invading her co-workers' privacy by reading their mind. Holy crap. But that's only if the show ever actually went anywhere with it, which it doesn't. We never get any development into Tosh's sexuality, or the fact that her co-workers think that she's a pushover, or how she even really feels about any of that. This episode introduces much needed character development that ends up going nowhere. So at the end of the day, Tosh remains the most underwhelming character in the whole of Torchwood. But at the same time, she's not quite as bad as the single worst character in anything Doctor Who related. Yes, worse than Clara. Yes, worse than anyone in the new Jodie Whittaker series. I'm talking about Dr. Owen Harper. Holy crap, I forgot how much of a dildo this guy is. I mean, where do I even start with him? He's angsty, he's arrogant, he's egotistical, he insults absolutely everyone around him, he sleeps sleeps with anything that moves, but not in the fun Captain Jack flirty but respectful kind of way, but the creepy entitled I own you and you owe me sex kind of way. He is just an outright awful person in the first season, such to the point that he literally had to die and come back to life in the second season for me to give a shit about him. Every piece of dialogue he has is just him being a complete head to one or multiple characters. I think it's meant to be charming, but it just comes off as obnoxious. His levels of sexual immaturity are beyond Barney Stinson levels of unsettling. I mean, he outright does the sci-fi equivalent of date raping two people in the very first episode. He conspires to get into Gwen's pants for the first half of season 1 just for the hell of it, despite the fact that he knows she's in a committed relationship. And yeah, I know it takes two to tango and all that, and I'll get into why I hate that aspect of Gwen in a minute, but all the same, it's still Owen that's putting most of the pressure on her to make this whole affair happen. I mean, there is literally nothing likable about this guy. Just take the episode Out of Time, when he gets an actual honest-to-goodness girlfriend. At first, it seems like this is a relationship that's actually helping Owen grow as a person, but even then, I can't fully get behind it because of how awful they made him beforehand. The character they set up for Owen in Series 1 was that of an arsehole who date rapes women, and in his own words,
I torture people in happy relationships.
So this whole dynamic just comes off as a creepy pickup artist trying to get laid after getting tired of banging Gwen. The only other episode in season 1 which gave Owen even a modicum of sympathy, or at least direction, was the episode Combat, which is essentially Fight Club but with weevils. We actually see a bit of insight into his character here and the hollowness that's motivating his douchey tendencies. This is expressed most strongly in the ending when Owen outright intimidates two weevils locked in the Torchwood basement. When I first saw this, I was under the impression that they were going to make Owen kind of go to the dark side a bit, like he was going to end up as a major antagonist in the show. That would have been cool and kind of interesting and would have made sense given how much of a person he is, but no, it's barely ever brought up again and really doesn't do much to justify his sheer unlikable personality. Then there's Yanto. Sweet Yanto, who's the closest thing to a likable side character in the first season, but even then he gets his moments of crazy thrown in there as well. Just take the already stupid as hell episode Cyber Woman as a clear-cut example of Yanto's flip-floppy character. I mean, let's just ignore the bad pacing and the beyond silly design for the Cyber Woman armor. I mean, what the hell is this, Victoria's Secret sci-fi edition? I mean, this is like a parody of a Doctor Who monster, for Christ's sake. Ignoring all that, let's just focus on how much of a dimwit Yanto is in this episode. He smuggles his girlfriend Lisa into the Torchwood base after she is partially turned into a Cyberman during the whole Torchwood London attack, spends months and months working on a cure without his co-workers' knowledge, brings a man in to examine her only for Lisa to kill the and then hijack and lock down the entire base. She then almost kills Gwen before successfully killing Jack, for half a second anyway, because he's immortal, and basically endangers the entire team, all because I love her. Okay, so by the end of this episode, we've got 2 people dead, 3 technically, and the whole of the human race put in danger because of one idiot's feelings towards someone, and then just to compound the matter, he tries to turn it around on Jack as if he is somehow the bad guy here.
You like to think you're a hero, but you're the biggest monster of all.
F you, Yanto. I mean, I'm gonna like you in the later seasons and all, but for right now in this season, fuck you and your puerile Romeo and Juliet tween-age love story bullshit. This speaks to a much larger problem with the first season, that of the overarching theme of corruption. The main crux of the show in its first run was that each of the characters end up being somehow corrupted by Torchwood and the enemies that they try to combat. But here's the problem. The corrupting influence, that being Torchwood, rarely has any real correlation with the terrible things that the characters end up doing. For instance, one really dumb thing that they do with Gwen's character is making her cheat on her loving boyfriend Reese several times with Owen, the human personification of a Chad meme. And at one point she even drugs him with a memory pill so that she can confess to him guilt-free just to see if he'll forgive her without having to deal with any fallout. How is any of this a result of her joining Torchwood? How would Gwen, finding out about alien life and seeing the darker aspects of humanity and the universe at large, translate to her cheating on and drugging her boyfriend? The end result doesn't connect to the supposedly corrupting influence elements which facilitated it. A does not lead to B. If you want the best example of what I'm talking about, look no further than the final episode of Series 1. Let's just run through the events real quick. The time-space rift that Torchwood monitors is going haywire after Owen opened it in the last episode in order to bring Jack and Tosh back from the past. Creatures and people from all over history and planets are dropping into Cardiff and the rest of the world, and it seems like there's nothing they can do to stop it. Then, the mysterious time-traveling man known as Billis shows up and tells the team that they can undo the damage by opening the rift fully and completely, and allowing the alien elements to slip back through. Jack, quite logically, points out that doing the exact same thing which caused this disaster in the first place, only bigger, would be a really fucking stupid idea. But the other members of the team begin to see visions of people that they love, telling them to open up the rift. This then culminates with Billis killing Reese, sending Gwen into a massive frenzy and siding with Owen and the others as they do the single stupidest thing it is possible for them to do and opening up the rift. But only after, shooting Jack, their boss who told them not to do this, in the head because, well, he's just using logic, and that's something only inconvenient people do. The rift is opened, the alien elements go back as predicted, but it also allows a really fake looking green demon called Abaddon to come through and start stepping all over Cardiff, killing everyone within his shadow. Okay, so we've gone from sci-fi Doctor Who spin-off to a Doom game, that's nice. The team then look to Jack for a solution after they, shot him in the head and he came back to life, and he stands in Abaddon's shadow, overpowering him somehow because Jack is incapable of dying and that for some reason defeats the big evil demon that absorbs life from all around. I don't fucking know. The episode then ends with Jack coming back to life after dying again, and somehow all of the team are forgiven, and Jack hears the TARDIS approaching and subsequently abandons the others to reunite with him. So where do I even start with this? I talked earlier about how Gwen's character kind of gets ruined the further season 1 goes on, but this was honestly the episode which broke my back. After receiving a vision of Reese dying from Billis, Gwen decides to totally trust the word of a creepy old man with the ability to jump through time, who has given her no reason to trust him, runs home to save her BF, stuns his ass, and imprisons him against his will because she thinks it will somehow save him. He then gets killed by Billis anyway. Gwen goes all f***ing grieving girlfriend psycho even after she cheated on her boyfriend 500,000 times with Owen, and then helps the rest of the team commit mutiny and essentially bring about the end of the world. That is Daenerys Targaryen levels of shark jumping. Gwen's decision making in this episode is so far off the rails and so out of left field that I cannot think of a conceivable way to justify it. I mean, I know you're grieving and everything, but actually, no, you know what? I can't even buy that much. I do not want to bash on Eve Miles here or anything, but her acting really doesn't lend Gwen any favors when she has to be super angry and super emotional.
What's the fucking point of you? You bring it back! You bring it back! You understand me, Dad? Fucking heartless!
She comes across less like a grieving woman in this scene who has just lost someone that she loves, and more like a bratty child having a temper tantrum. And this level of stupidity is not just limited to her. Yanto in the previous episode shot Owen in the back to prevent him from opening the rift. Now, after seeing a vision/hallucination of his dead girlfriend telling him to open the rift, suddenly he's all on board with the idea. Same goes for Tosh. After a whole season of finding out little to nothing about her character, she decides to violate the one personality trait she has, her intelligence, and help in the Suicide Squad's fucking insane endeavor. Then there's Chad Broseph Overlord Owen fricking Harper III. After a whole season of hating this guy, this episode actually made me want to see him get killed off. Turning on your boss is one thing, going against your boss's wishes is another, and then doing the exact same thing that he has told you time and again will doom humanity is a whole other thing, but then you shoot him in the head because you're an insecure man-child who doesn't like taking orders. I think I'm just gonna leave this one up to Star-Lord, honestly.
What is your goal here? To get everybody to hate you? Because it's working.
I mean, he didn't know that Jack was gonna come back from the dead. He literally just committed murder because...
I'm sick of people doubting me.
What better evidence do you need that this guy is an insecure moron who is so enslaved to his own image of himself that he is outright willing to kill people for the sake of protecting his ego? Compare End of Days to my favourite episode of Season 1, They Keep Killing Susie, where the team resurrect their old comrade turned traitor Susie Costello to help with a murder investigation. It's eventually revealed that Susie herself orchestrated the whole series of events as a way of essentially conquering death, and the episode deals with a lot of heavy theming, dramatic tension, and intense characterization. Susie is one of the strongest characters in all of Torchwood, even though she only shows up twice, but the reason she is such a compelling antagonist is because we understand exactly why she has declined to this point of villainy.
Why are you doing this?
Because life is all Jack. I'd do anything to stay. Anything.
This whole monologue she gives to Jack is gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, tragic, and totally relatable. Even though she's killing Gwen to keep herself alive, we understand exactly why. Of course someone who is this obsessed with life and survival would do these things. Her corruption makes total logical sense within the narrative. By comparison, the corrupt decisions of the other characters in End of Days makes absolutely no sense. How do the circumstances that they encounter in any way justify or support their choices to cheat on their lovers with complete and total douchebags, or endanger the lives of their co-workers and the survival of the whole human race, or, you know, end the goddamn world? If they wanted to have the characters get realistically corrupted by the situations that they found themselves in, they could have had Owen become a major antagonist, or maybe have it that Reese stays dead and Gwen has to live with the consequences of what she's done. But no, the episode ends with a nice little bow on top, no repercussions for their actions whatsoever, and we're somehow meant to buy it. When it got to the end and Jack outright forgives all of them after they committed mutiny, killed him, then brought about the end of the world, I just couldn't believe it. If I were him, I would be giving each and every one of them the sack, retconning their asses, and shoving them out into the cold to fend for themselves. That is the least they deserve. And they never even address half the stuff that they set up in the episode. I mean, who the hell was this Billis guy the whole time? What about all the people who were killed by Abaddon? What about the sheer level of destruction that he would have caused? Never answered, never explained, never resolved, never even mentioned in any subsequent episode after this one. And no, I don't want to hear any of that whole, oh, they explained it in an extended universe crap, or the novels explain it, or some shit like that. I don't care. I'm talking about the show and the show only. And the show never addresses it, so it fails. I know it seems like I'm ragging on Torchwood a lot in this video, but if Season 1 was to come out now, I don't think it would get anything like the same kind of praise that it did back then. So thank God Season 2 came out. Season 2 of Torchwood saw a massive improvement to the show. This is the point when the characters became more interesting, we actually got some more insight with Tosh, Owen, and Yanto. Gwen and Reese's relationship is developed a lot more, we get some pretty cool tie-ins to Doctor Who, and we delve heavily into Jack's backstory, which had remained a mystery up to this point. We get it a bit in the first episode as a partner from Jack's past shows up calling himself John Hart, otherwise known as the best villain in this show and one of the best villains in Doctor Who canon, period. We then get a little bit more in the episode Adam, where a mind-altering alien infiltrates Torchwood and starts with their memories. We learn Jack had a pleasant childhood with his family until an alien race suddenly attacked their settlement and took his brother after he let go of his hand. These are elements which the show strongly needed. It's all well and good having a more adult-oriented spin-off of Doctor Who, which explores darker, more sinister themes than its parent show, but if you don't have a strong enough cast of characters, then it'll all end up falling flat. Luckily, Season 2 made the characters infinitely stronger than they were before. The best episode of the season, and maybe the whole show, at least to me, is the episode Fragments, which shows how each of the characters aside from Gwen joined Torchwood. It fills in some much needed backstory, it made the characters far more engaging, and it had some of the best writing in the whole show. We also got some development with Gwen's relationship with her boyfriend and now fiance, Reese. Reese in the first season was kind of relegated to the stock boyfriend character who just gets on by everyone around him. But in season 2, he becomes an active participant. In the episode Meet, he finds out about Gwen's job and she refuses to erase his memory by the end. Then in the episode Something Borrowed, he saves Gwen's life from an alien larvae growing in her womb. He is now in the life as much as her. He feels like much more of a three-dimensional person here, which is a major improvement to both himself and to Gwen. He's not just the disposable boyfriend for her to cheat on, they love each other, but their relationship at the same time isn't perfect. They have problems, they have stuff to work through, and Torchwood does end up impacting them in a far more believable way than just having Gwen cheat on him for no reason with Owen.
It's just this thing at work.
I don't care. When you're with me, we deal with us, right? Our lives. You got a problem at work, you sort it at work.
This is an actual argument between two adults. This is believable, this is relatable, it's a huge improvement to the idiotic psychodrama of the previous season. Another cool thing they did, I thought, was bring Martha in as a bit of a cameo for a few episodes. This helped flesh out the stories, it added a new character dynamic that we hadn't seen beforehand, as well as tying into Doctor Who in a way that doesn't feel hackneyed or contrived. It's cool seeing what Martha's been up to since leaving the TARDIS in the previous season of Doctor Who, and the fact that she's a medic working for UNIT, otherwise known as the United Nations Intelligence Task Force, makes total sense. Her character is a bit divisive among the Doctor Who fanbase, but seeing little developments like this and her future cameos in the Doctor Who series fleshed her out a great deal more than what was already there. They even managed to redeem Owen's character a bit. Not completely, because the hole that the showrunners had dug for him was so deep that you would need the team that rescued the Chilean miners to pull him out. But the character arc that they made for him was a genuinely solid attempt. Owen gets killed trying to save Martha's life and is partially resurrected by a similar glove that was used to bring back Susie Costello, except that he's not really alive. He's still dead, just conscious. He can't eat, he can't drink, he can't have sex, his body won't heal, he can't experience physical sensations anymore. He is the definition of a living corpse. That's kinda hellish. The episode A Day in the Death focuses entirely on Owen adjusting to this new state of unlife. It's pretty heavy stuff, and again, it's a major improvement on the kind of person he was in season 1. By making the cast more engaging, the show is able to produce some genuinely compelling material by injecting character development into the plot, while the crew are battling alien threats or also learning a great deal about who they are. That is how you create a solid, well-paced narrative. Episodes like Sleeper, Meet, and Adrift all offer some of the most touching and gut-wrenching stories in all of Doctor Who canon. The episode Meat, for instance, explores themes involving animal cruelty, the meatpacking industry, and the callous mindsets of those who run it. But at the same time, we're also learning about Gwen and Rhys's relationship, the consequences of Gwen's double life, and by the end, we have seen the characters make some definite strides forward. In the episode Adrift, Gwen investigates an epidemic of missing persons taken by the Rift and finds the main boy that she was looking for, now aged 40 years older and scarred beyond recognition. If you've seen the episode, you know just how heartbreaking that reunion scene was between him and his mum. The episode is one of the best Gwen-centered stories in the show because we're seeing how much of an effect that Torchwood is having on her. Again, character plus plot. The season also ends on a much stronger finale than the previous one. Rather than just having some interchangeable baddie come along and unleash the demon dog from Ghostbusters, we have John Hart making a return from the first episode, along with Jack's brother, Gray, as they terrorize Cardiff and attempt to tear Jack's world down around him. This feels more personal, more intimate than season 1's finale, because the disastrous circumstances revolve around the characters. And also the characters aren't acting like f***ing dipshits. You see them work as a proper cohesive unit here, unlike in the last season where they were just kind of all over the place. Here you feel like the team is, well, a team. They communicate, they work together in their efforts to try and save the city instead of not doing that. It's also great fleshing out Jack's backstory and really seeing some of the personal pain that this guy's holding on to. Although having his brother be the big bad guy here does kind of feel a bit soap opera-ish. All in all, Season 2 saw a massive improvement to Torchwood, which would only be bolstered in Season 3. While the first 2 seasons maintained a consistent format, Children of Earth went a totally different route. Instead of the usual 13 episodes, this season spanned only 5, released on a 5-day period in July 2009. It also ditched the Freak of the Week format of previous seasons and employed a single overarching plot from start to finish, involving a bizarre global phenomenon as every child of Earth starts speaking in unison to give cryptic messages to humanity. This improved the show's pacing immensely. In the previous seasons, the whole Freak of the Week thing kinda made the episodes feel disjointed and inconsistent. Plot points would be resolved without any sense of satisfaction. Character beats would be introduced and then never brought up again. Filler would just be dropped into the episodes without any real consistent point. But with a single overarching storyline, the plot and pacing feels a lot more consistent. This was helped by the limited number of episodes. I'm a firm believer in the maxim that less is more, and when you put certain limitations on a creative endeavor, that can force the writer or the artist or whoever to think more laterally about whatever it is that they are creating. This was definitely the case with Children of Earth. By having fewer episodes, and now fewer main characters because Owen and Tosh are gone, the show feels more focused. It doesn't meander around to a million different plot threads that don't go anywhere, and it doesn't waste minutes of its runtime on pointless filler. I remember being on the edge of my seat waiting to see what happened next as each day rolled around and a new episode came on the air. I was gripped during the action, I cried during the character deaths, I was terrified by the mysterious aliens until they actually reveal what they look like, and yeah, sorry, but that does look really goofy. At the same time, the show does still manage to tackle its more adult theming. Government oppression, loss of innocence, the long-term effects of immortality, the sins of our past. These are all themes that are brought up in this 5-episode stint. And even in the context of Torchwood, it gets pretty goddamn dark. When the alien threat, the 456, demands that the people of Earth hand over 10% of its child population or face extinction, the UK government obliges and actually starts rounding up the undesirable children of Britain to basically offer as a sacrifice of sorts. This scenario is then mirrored in the utterly heartbreaking climactic episode when Jack finds a way to kill the 456 by sacrificing the life of his own grandson. While the human race is saved, he did have to murder a child in order to do it, and his relationship with his already estranged daughter is now all but in tatters. But it gets even darker before that. The character John Frobisher, played ironically by future 13th Doctor Peter Capaldi, is ordered by the Prime Minister to offer up his own children to the 456, and rather than submit, he Yeah, Children of Earth is easily one of the bleakest things to ever come out of the Doctor Who universe, and part of that is because it feels so real and true to life. Unlike previous seasons of Torchwood, where the dark elements occasionally kind of felt like an edgelord's take on Doctor Who, this feels a lot more grounded, a lot more gritty. It doesn't take much of a stretch to imagine that our government would do something like this in real life, which is what makes it so unsettling. For all the terrifying aliens and suspenseful action scenes, the cold, calculating way that the government officials discuss selling off millions of children is perhaps the most chilling thing that the show has ever portrayed. It's dark, it's compelling, and it is above all else heartbreaking. Yanto got a lot more development in Children of Earth, and his infamous death scene still chokes me up every time. Seeing Frobisher getting repeatedly shat on by his superiors while he does everything he can to manage the situation he's forced in, only for it to end like this? It is so gut-wrenching. For me, Children of Earth is Torchwood at its absolute finest. It's got the drama, it's got the suspense, it's got the character, it's got the dark sci-fi, it's got the heavy themes. Despite a rocky journey through season 1 and a bit of season 2, this is the point where the showrunners had figured everything out. They knew what elements worked in the show and played to them beautifully, thereby making Children of Earth one of the standout pieces of extended Doctor Who canon and a beautifully tragic way to conclude Torchwood. And then along came the Americans. Season 4, titled Miracle Day, was the last season of Torchwood to air before it went on its hiatus, and Yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, I'm unsure if it's worse than season 1, but I'll kind of let that one up to you in the comment section. A little bit of backstory: the Children of Earth season aired in 2009, roughly a year before David Tennant's last run as the Doctor. In a way, it kind of seemed like Russell T Davies and everyone else was trying to wrap up loose ends, and Children of Earth worked well in that regard for Torchwood. It was very much a perfect swan song, a good salute to a solid attempt at a good spin-off from Doctor Who. And yet, despite this, Davies stated that he still had ideas about where to take the show and subsequently looked to US networks to help fund a 4th season. Fox were reported to have turned them down, with some fans speculating that it would be something of a reboot if they had picked it up, but eventually Davies succeeded in striking a deal with American broadcaster Starz. You know, those guys who made Outlander, Black Sails, American Gods, and nothing else that you've ever seen. Production was announced in 2010, and the 4th season, titled Miracle Day, aired in 2011, 2 years after the 3rd season ended. Like Children of Earth, Miracle Day features a single ongoing storyline, as death seems to have miraculously vanished from the human race. People just stop dying all of a sudden, and this has massive consequences on a global scale. But on top of this, Jack returns to Earth after he left in the previous season and finds that somehow he has become mortal while the rest of the world has become immortal. The differences between this and the earlier seasons become very clear very quickly. Miracle Day features a far more American-based cast, the vast number of locations are in America rather than in Wales, the special effects budget was upped, and the overall style, storytelling, and aesthetic is noticeably changed. This had a very mixed impact on the show as a whole. On the one hand, it was neat actually seeing the showrunners able to pull off the effect that they've been going for in previous seasons, just on a good budget. And the season also has some genuinely inventive and well-written episodes. My personal favourite of the whole bunch primarily takes place on an aeroplane, as Jack has been poisoned and Gwen and their new partner Rex have to find a way to cure him with the very limited resources that they have on board. The writing is tense, the pacing is good, and there's a palpable tension in the air as, for the first time, Jack's life is actually in danger. That being said, it doesn't take long for the season to veer off course. For example, the overall pacing is a very big problem in this season. I feel like Miracle Day would have benefited from getting the Children of Earth treatment, and maybe get half the number of episodes that they ended up with. This would have sharpened the writing and made the pacing less laborious than it ended up being. While some of the episodes have some genuinely tight and engaging writing, others just feel repetitive and meandering. The conceit that death has just up and left humanity is a decent core concept, but there's only so much you can do with it to maintain the audience's interest. At a point, they start introducing world-building elements that don't contribute to the overall narrative, or if they do, they just end up making the whole thing feel overly convoluted. For example, one of the biggest plot points revolves around a character called Oswald Danes, played by Bill Pullman, a child murderer who was condemned on death row during Miracle Day and of course survived. This, for some reason, gives the man a ton of publicity, and he becomes a prominent and popular public figure for Miracle Day, and he ends up butting heads with a bizarre segregationist movement saying that dead is dead and condemning the whole global phenomenon. And then we get into this big twist that the whole Miracle Day thing was orchestrated by a secret organization known as the Families, and they at some point in history got a hold of Jack's immortal blood and then fed that blood into this weird rock formation that feeds through the center of the earth called the Blessing, and that somehow makes all of humanity immortal, I guess. And why are the Families even doing this? I've got no idea. It's too all over the place for me to follow, and that is the season's biggest problem. Say what you want about the previous seasons, even at their silliest and most cringy, they did manage to tell a coherent plot. In seasons 1 and 2, each episode had an easy to follow beginning, middle, and end. Children of Earth had a strong flowing narrative from episode 1 to episode 5, which was exciting, tense, and suspenseful. The twists that it threw in there were simple, and it didn't make your brain hurt from the strain of having to keep up. In Miracle Day, the plot can't decide to go either too fast or too slow. We either meander around repetitive storylines with Gwen, Jack, and the others just running away from nebulous bad guys again and again, or the endless litany of twists and revelations that it keeps throwing at you are rushed through so quickly that it's hard to even follow what the story is meant to be. Part of this, I feel personally, was caused by trying to format Torchwood into a more American style of TV writing. exciting. British TV and American TV generally have a lot of differences that are caused by a ton of factors, such as budget constraints, censorship laws from country to country, TV license fees versus advertising fees, and so on and so forth. I could honestly do a whole video talking about that one topic alone, but I swore to myself I was going to keep this video under an hour long, so moving on. A fundamental aspect of Torchwood in earlier seasons was its quintessential Britishness, or more specifically, Welshness. While the limited budget left much to be desired in terms of special effects, it did lead to some compelling and thought-provoking stories. The episode Adrift features almost no special effects at all, 0 action scenes, it was filmed entirely on location in and around Wales, and it is one of the most gut-wrenching episodes in the whole season, and a character-defining moment for Gwen. This again cuts to my point that constraints can make a piece of media better, and nowhere is that better demonstrated than in Miracle Day. With a bigger budget and more episodes, the showrunners felt like they could do anything they wanted, and while ambition is admirable and all, it doesn't necessarily translate into good content. And in the case of Miracle Day, it led to the show becoming overcomplicated, convoluted, and for lack of a better term, up its own arse. There's too much to follow, too much to keep up with, and the plot isn't paced in such a way to make audiences feel inclined to pay much attention. By focusing more on convoluted plots, the show diverts direction away from the emotional journey of the characters, both old and new. Gwen and Jack don't get much in the way of development, and by the end of the season, I really don't feel shit for the new American actors who have joined the cast. Also, just a quick little side point, how the hell did this whole Miracle Day thing happen with everyone on the planet suddenly incapable of dying, and yet it was never mentioned by either Amy or Rory or anyone else during Matt Smith's run as the Doctor? I mean, they take place at roughly the same time on the same planet in the same universe, right? Someone would have at least made a passing reference to a global event of that magnitude, wouldn't they? Yeah, I know this seems like nitpicking, especially considering there was a giant demon rocking over Cardiff in season 1 and that never gets mentioned again, but I always appreciated how tight the continuity was in Doctor Who lore, so seeing it just get ignored like this reminds me of how disjointed Miracle Day seems. It doesn't feel connected to Doctor Who, and it doesn't even feel connected to the earlier seasons of Torchwood. It feels like its own separate thing, and that is a big problem with it. While Miracle Day posits some good core concepts, it stretches them out over too many episodes, sacrifices character for complex plots, and fundamentally loses the charm which made Torchwood so memorable to begin with. However, despite its flaws and the mixed reception during its run, Miracle Day does end on a big cliffhanger, setting up a future season with all sorts of mysteries and twists and turns that would likely keep audiences on the edge of their seats eager for more. And the show has been in limbo ever since. Davies announced in late 2012 that the show was entering an indefinite hiatus, which is basically a polite way of saying we're cancelled. So all of you desperate fans out there hoping that Torchwood will one day return, let it go, guys. It ain't happening, and even if it did, do any of you really want to see the cast of Torchwood return 10 years older than they were? It would be like seeing Jack Harkness suddenly reappear in the new Jodie Whittaker season. Oh, wait a minute. To be fair to the slow wreck that was Miracle Day, I am at a loss as to where the show could have gone after Children of Earth. The story of Jack, Gwen, and the organization of Torchwood is done when Jack leaves Earth. That 5-episode stint felt like a proper send-off for both the show and the characters within it. Despite their losses and their trauma, Gwen and Reese are alive, happy, and expecting a child. Gwen gets an appropriately happy ending and a normal life after the excitement and danger of her life in Torchwood. Meanwhile, on the more downer end of the spectrum, Jack has lost pretty much any reason to go on. His team and his friends are dead. His lover, Yanto, is dead. The organization that he has helped build for the past century has been wiped out. He killed his own grandson to save the world, and his own daughter despises him as a result. Jack has got no reason to stay on Earth, so he does the logical thing and leaves. While it is depressing as it is an emotionally complete way of finishing Jack's arc, same as with Gwen. So continuing their story beyond that point just doesn't make any sense. It's over. There's nowhere we can go from here. All in all, Torchwood's greatest strength and often its greatest weakness came from its characters. It is able to tell darker and more thought-provoking narratives than its parent show, but what makes said narratives so compelling are the people interacting with them. The sci-fi threats that the Torchwood team face are every bit as real as the ones in Doctor Doctor Who, except that the Doctor isn't around to make everything hunky-dory by the end. These are ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances, and they just have to make do with what they have to keep people safe. When the show takes advantage of that, it is at its strongest. When it forgets its strengths, such as by making its characters unlikable or unmemorable, or focusing more on overly convoluted sci-fi plots, it starts to falter. While the show does have its highs and lows, it still manages to tug a nostalgic heartstring within myself and countless others. Just take a look at the Yanto Jones fan memorial at Cardiff, which still stands to this day. So all in all, despite being a grumpy, cynical adult stuck in possibly the worst year in living memory, I can still consider myself deep down to be a proper Torchwood fanboy. Except for Owen, who can go die in a f***ing hole.